Chop. I chopped the onions for the salad. She chopped the carrots into small cubes. To chop. Slice. He sliced the tomatoes thinly. I sliced the bread before breakfast. To slice. Grate. She grated the cheese for the pizza. I grated carrots for the salad. To grate. Peel. I peeled the apples for the pie. He peeled the potatoes for dinner. To peel. Stir. She stirred the soup slowly. I stirred the sauce to prevent burning. To stir. Knead. She kneaded the dough for 10 minutes. I kneaded the bread dough until elastic. To knead. Boil. I boiled the pasta for lunch. She boiled the potatoes for mashed potatoes. To boil. Grease. I greased the pan before baking. She greased the tray with butter. To grease. Strain. She strained the pasta to drain the hot water. She strained the sauce to remove lumps. To strain. Sift. I sifted the flour before baking. She sifted cocoa powder into the bowl. To sift. Crush. I crushed the garlic with a press. She crushed the nuts for the topping. To crush. Squeeze. I squeezed fresh orange juice. She squeezed lemon over the fish. To squeeze. Glaze. I glazed the donuts with chocolate. She glazed the carrots with honey. To glaze. Pipe. I piped frosting onto the cupcakes. She piped cream into the pastries. To pipe. Sauté. She sautéed the mushrooms in butter. I sautéed the onions until golden. To sauté. Crack. I cracked 2 eggs into the bowl. She cracked the shell gently to avoid pieces falling in. To crack. Baste. She basted the turkey with juices. I basted the meat while roasting. To baste. Spread. I spread frosting on the cake. She spread butter on the bread. To spread. Garnish. I garnished the soup with parsley. She garnished the cake with berries. To garnish. Mix. I mixed the flour and eggs together. She mixed the salad ingredients. To mix. Whisk. I whisked the eggs for the omelette. She whisked the cream until fluffy. To whisk. Beat. He beat the butter and sugar together. I beat the eggs until smooth. To beat. Season. I seasoned the soup with salt and pepper. She seasoned the meat before frying. To season. Sprinkle. She sprinkled cheese on the pasta. I sprinkled sugar on the donuts. To sprinkle. Bake. I baked cookies for my friends. She baked a cake for the birthday. To bake. Roast. She roasted the chicken with vegetables. I roasted nuts for the snack. To roast. Toast. I toasted the bread for sandwiches. She toasted the nuts lightly. To toast. Steam. I steamed broccoli for lunch. She steamed dumplings for dinner. To steam. Blanch. I blanched the spinach before freezing. She blanched the tomatoes to remove skins. To blanch. Poach. She poached eggs for breakfast. I poached chicken for salad. To poach. Pour. I poured milk into the bowl. She poured the sauce over the pasta. To pour. Coat. She coated the chicken in breadcrumbs. I coated the fish with flour. To coat. Roll. I rolled the dough into circles. She rolled the cookies into balls. To roll. Wrap. She wrapped the burritos. I wrapped the dumplings. To wrap. Layer. She layered the lasagna noodles. I layered fruit in yogurt. To layer. Stuff. I stuffed the peppers with rice. She stuffed the chicken with herbs. To stuff. Dip. I dipped the fries in ketchup. She dipped the cookies in chocolate. To dip. Measure. I measured 2 cups of flour. She measured the sugar carefully. To measure. Weigh. I weighed the ingredients on a scale. She weighed the meat before cooking. To weigh. Rinse. I rinsed the rice before cooking. She rinsed the vegetables well. To rinse. Drain. I drained the boiled potatoes. She drained the tuna can. To drain. Cool. I let the cookies cool on the rack. She cooled the soup before storing. To cool. Freeze. I froze the leftovers. She froze the berries for smoothies. To freeze. Thaw. I thawed the chicken in the fridge. She thawed the bread before eating. To thaw. Caramelize. I caramelized the onions slowly. She caramelized the sugar for dessert. To caramelize. Mash. I mashed the potatoes. She mashed the bananas for bread. To mash. Proof. Let the dough proof for 1 hour. The rolls proofed nicely before baking. To proof. Torch. I torched the crème brûlée topping. She torched the cheese on the dish. To torch. Mince. She minced the meat. I minced the onions into tiny pieces. To mince. Flatten. I flattened the dough with a rolling pin. She flattened the cutlets. To flatten. Dice. She diced the potatoes for the soup. I diced the peppers for the filling. To dice. Simmer. The sauce simmered for 20 minutes. I let the soup simmer on low heat. To simmer. Fry. I fried the eggs for breakfast. She fried the chicken in oil. To fry. Deep fry. They deep fried the donuts. I deep fried the potatoes. To deep fry. She tenderized the steak. I tenderized the pork by marinating. To tenderize. Grill. I grilled the meat on the barbecue. He grilled vegetables for dinner. To grill. Broil. He broiled the fish quickly. I broiled the vegetables for a smoky taste. To broil. Marinate. I marinated the chicken overnight. She marinated the beef for grilling. To marinate. Drizzle. She drizzled honey on the yogurt. I drizzled olive oil on the salad. To drizzle. Shuck. I shucked the corn for the grill. She shucked oysters for the seafood dish. To shuck. Stew. I stewed beef slowly for hours. She stewed apples with cinnamon. To stew. Scramble. I scrambled eggs with cheese. She scrambled tofu for a vegan breakfast. To scramble. Pickle. I pickled cucumbers in vinegar. She pickled onions for tacos. To pickle. Ferment. I fermented cabbage to make kimchi. She fermented dough overnight. To ferment. Soak. I soaked beans overnight. She soaked the rice for 20 minutes. To soak. Dissolve. I dissolved sugar in hot water. She dissolved the yeast in warm milk. To dissolve. Spray. I sprayed oil on the baking tray. She sprayed water on the bread before baking. To spray. Flip. I flipped the pancakes carefully. She flipped the omelette in the pan. To flip. Separate. She separated the egg whites from the yolks. I separated the bones from the chicken meat. To separate. Whip. I whipped the cream until it formed stiff peaks. She whipped the eggs to add more air. To whip. Cut. I cut the bread for sandwiches. She cut the vegetables for the stir-fry. To cut. Carve. I carved the turkey for dinner. She carved the roast into slices. To carve. Clarify. I clarified the butter for cooking. She clarified the broth to make it clear. To clarify. Zest. I zest a lemon for the cake. She zest the orange for the salad. To zest. Shred. I shredded the cheese for pizza. She shredded the cabbage for coleslaw. To shred. Skewer. I skewered the chicken for grilling. She skewered the vegetables for the barbecue. To skewer. Toss. I tossed the salad with dressing. She tossed the pasta with olive oil. To toss. Barbecue. We barbecued ribs in the backyard. He barbecued vegetables on the grill. To barbecue. Decorate. I decorated the cake with strawberries. She decorated the cookies with icing. To decorate. Serve. I served the soup hot. She served the salad on a big plate. To serve. Rehydrate. I rehydrated the dried mushrooms in warm water. She rehydrated the raisins before baking. To rehydrate. Dehydrate. I dehydrated apple slices for snacks. She dehydrated herbs to store them longer. To dehydrate. Stir fry. I stir-fried the vegetables in a hot pan. She stir-fried the chicken with soy sauce. To stir-fry. Chiffonade. I chiffonade the basil for the pasta. She chiffonade the spinach into thin ribbons. To chiffonade. Extrude. They extruded the dough into noodles. The machine extrudes the dough to make pasta. To extrude. Churn. They churned the cream into butter. I churned the ice cream mixture until it thickened. To churn. Deiced. I deiced the peppers before chopping them. She deiced the tomatoes for the salad. To deiced. Gut. He gutted the fish at the sink. She gutted the trout before cooking it. To gut. Hull. I hulled the strawberries for the cake. She hulled the berries before freezing them. To hull. Mill. They milled the wheat into flour. I milled the spices to make them finer. To mill. Pare. She pared the apples for the pie. I pared the potatoes quickly. To pare. Pit. I pitted the cherries for the dessert. She pitted the olives before adding them. To pit. Sear. I seared the steak in a hot pan. She seared the chicken before baking. To sear.